Hey guys, welcome back. This is part 2 of how the coronavirus actually changed the world. After I did my first video, I saw a couple people actually posting a couple of graphs when it came to spiral dynamics, and I'm very proud of you guys. The only thing is that make sure that you guys are being able to teach the pedagogy when it comes to being able to give it to the public, because this is very complicated stuff, and I've been studying this for about 10 years since I was 19. So the fact that I can actually teach it means a lot. And you want to be able to educate the public in the right fashion and manner, not just because you have the information. That knowledge is power, if that makes sense. You need to be able to know how to use the knowledge, specifically when it comes to this day and age right now. So just to kind of recap what we were talking about, we had different types of drives when it came to our paradigms. At each paradigm we function at, we have specific needs and coping mechanisms. Basically looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs to kind of give us an understanding of what it is that we are doing in the world and how that relates to us and what does that say about us. Being able to understand what your physiological needs are, your safety needs, love and belonging, self-esteem, cognitive, aesthetic, and self-actualization allow you to actually function at this level and provide innovative ways to problem solve in the world. We want to be able to function at this level even if we are there innovative in terms of affluence, influence, and any value that we bring into the world. Now, the thing is that when people will teach this, they will only teach it from this perspective of our perspectives. Is that they won't actually teach you about the different states that we actually go through. So we have our gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual. So at each level that you go through, again, we're meeting the needs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we will have an experience. And depending on where we're at will be our center of gravity. We will meet gurus that will teach you a certain type of meditation practice, yogic practice, self-development, or self-transcendence to get to this point that you want to be at from integral. Now, the only thing is that because they are at these stages and they've actually had the experience of states, they are basically inauthentically teaching you from a level that they're actually not being able to function at. They're trying to tell you things that you will only experience when you get to this point, but again, they're trying to speak from a higher place. Just to give you a brief history lesson on this and where this came about, Eclet was actually a emerging levels of human existence when it came to the double helix model of adult biological, biopsychosocial, behavior for humans. Now, Clare Graves actually met Maslow. Maslow actually said that self-actualization was the point of happiness for the longest time until he met Graves. This is where he actually put self-transcendence into the picture. Because Graves actually believed that they were emerging. It's not that we always stay at a stage in our lives, we actually fluctuate up and down. So what Graves said was that a person must change their psychology in order to acclimate to the changes bestowed on them of their existence. So again, we need to adapt to our life so we can be what we have always been, which is adapting animals. In 1952, Graves actually presented Maslow's paper to, I forgot exactly what it was called, but the Discourse of Psychology. So Maslow was sick for whatever reason, and Graves actually gave his Eclet's theory, and people started to actually question a lot of what Maslow was doing, and then eventually he created the self-transcendence. Now, eventually in the 1980s, Nelson Mandela came across Eclet, and he started working with Don Beck and Christopher Cohen, who were students of Clare Graves. He used this to end apartheid. He used it to understand people's value systems and communicate to them. As you know your audience will give you what you need, and as you give them what they want. Now, the way this actually developed was that Clare Graves, in his time as a professor, he would do a double-blind experiment where he would have students talk about what consisted of a healthy adult in the world. They would set up these paradigms or these ideologies, and then they would have another group of students come in, and then they will organize it from the least complicated to the most complicated. So as we develop, we become more complicated in our thinking as well as our development. Before we get to the self-transcendence, we need to understand who we are in the world. This is either coming from a healthy sense of role or a identity that we have created. Now, for us to understand who we are in the world, we need to understand where we're at, and then how do we change to get to that point. And we do that by asking questions, because each paradigm actually has its own sets of questions, as if it were a lock with a combination for you to unlock the next level. It's almost like Mario, and you can't reach the higher levels unless you've actually played and gained the skills and capabilities to reach that higher level of values and beliefs. So the questions that we're asking at this point is, where do I need to change? What do I need to change? How do I need to make these changes? Why do I need to make? Who am I? And do I reflect this? And then for whom do I serve, and for what purpose? Before we get to the whom, which is the self-transcendence, we need to understand who we are. This is at the self-actualization point. The only thing is that because we're so caught up in the roles that we have in life, we have created this self-fulfilling prophecy. So Robert Merton was a sociologist that created the deviance typology. And basically what he said was, as we go through life, we either accept the cultural goals and the institutional means from that place of living, right? We're now working at this level of strive and force and human bonds and stuff like that, where we're innovative, we have technology, we have resources. For us to meet the cultural goals that we have, which is the pursuit of happiness, right? We need to know whether we are doing it with institutional means, which means that if we're doing it through education, business, some form of systematic thinking that allowed us to actually meet those goals. Institutional means, by Robert Merton, we have 5 areas of life that, not 5 areas, but 5 identities that we have chosen to become as we go through life. Again, the cultural goals, and then the institutional means. And then it's a Punnett square, so we either accept, reject, accept, reject. Okay? So when we accept the cultural goals and the institutional means, we become conformist. You've probably heard this label before, where people will just conform with anything that they have, and they only understand that hard work and education is the only way to achieve those goals. When we look at the innovative aspect of life, we're looking at different ways that are unorthodox to attain these cultural goals. Sometimes you can look at entrepreneurs and organized crime in this aspect as well. When we're looking at being able to accept institutional means and reject cultural means, we're looking at ritualists, which means that they do not want to have no responsibility over, they don't want to have any responsibility over anything else other than what they have at this moment. They kind of lost hope at this point, and you kind of know people like that as well. Finally, we have the retreatists of this Punnett square, just so you know. Now, these individuals don't care, and these could be at higher levels as well, with socioeconomic status, where you have individuals that still don't want to work, don't want to have responsibility, all they do is sleep, and because they're being taken care of, they don't have to go through these needs to be satisfied. We also see how a lot of homeless people actually don't want to take responsibility, don't want to step into the tension, and find ways to meet the goals necessary for them to be part of the integration process of society. And these guys are outside of here, and they make their own goals, which is awesome for you guys if you're trying to do that. They go against the status quo, and usually it's like revolutionists where they're trying to go against the government and create their own government. Wherever you're at, again, we'll identify whether you are playing a role or if you're trying to find a healthy sense of self. So we have, again, if you're looking at this is very complicated stuff. That's why I try to make it very easy with the biological, psychological, and essence development that we go through when it comes to our self-development. We will go through a false sense of self, an invented sense of self, and then a true sense of self. And before we get to this point, we need to make sure that we are identifying with our true identity rather than the role that we actually play. So we need to break these paradigms completely by asking these questions and seeing where we're at in the levels of human existence. Now we have a really good understanding of, one, who you're listening to and whether they can actually provide this kind of information to you. So if they can't, then it's going to be a very difficult process for you to actually develop, because you will not be guided by the right people because they're not at this level that you want them to be. Next, we will see why is it that we develop a healthy sense of ego so we can get to our true essence. And that's going to be on the next video as we start looking at different perspectives when it comes to focus. Being able to focus will allow us to see, one, how we interpret the world, and then two, from an outer world, the compass of how we can look at people in these areas. We will use this Punnett square and develop it into the DISC model. That way we can actually go through life and have a good sense of understanding for people so we can communicate with them at the level that they're at, so we don't have to miscommunicate, talk over their heads, or make them feel like they're inferior to us for whatever reason. We're trying to make sure that we know where we're changing, what is it that we're changing, how is it that we're changing, why, and then who am I, and do I actually meet this identity with the changes that I've actually created. We want to be able to practice what we preach before we can get to a place where we're actually giving out more than ourselves. So I hope that actually gives you a pretty good understanding of the ECLET model. I use Maslow's hierarchy of needs because that's where it actually came from. If you didn't know that, now you do. And a little bit of, the history behind it as well. So that wraps it up. Guys, feel free to subscribe, hit that notification button, as well as comment below if you have any questions. If you are watching this on Facebook, feel free to comment as well. I will be creating more and more content as the days develop, as I try to educate the public as to what's going on in the world and their own self-development, so we can get to a good, true sense, healthy sense of self. And that's what we're trying to do in class. So I will see you guys in the next video. I'm out and about what I just talked about. Peace.